The late afternoon sun bore down on San Antonio, the kind of Texas heat that seemed to cling to your skin no matter how often you wiped your forehead. The parking lot outside a small barbecue restaurant shimmered in the haze, half empty except for a few trucks and sedans. Cicadas droned in the oak trees nearby, their steady chorus making the silence feel even heavier. Daniel Miller stood near the entrance, shifting his weight from one boot to the other. His palms were damp, though not from the heat. He checked his watch for the third time in 5 minutes, then let out a sharp breath. Every car that pulled in made his heart thump against his ribs, only to sink when a stranger stepped out. Rachel, his wife, placed a gentle hand on his arm. "Breathe," she whispered, her voice low but firm. Her dark hair was pulled back into a neat bun, her nurse's badge still clipped to her scrubs. She had come straight from her shift to be here, unwilling to let him face this moment alone. Daniel nodded, though his throat felt tight. He had waited 18 months for this day, chasing phone calls and following endless leads, never certain if the search would lead to anything but more disappointment. The thought that it might all end here today was almost too much to bear. Then at last, a white SUV rolled into the lot. Daniel's breath caught. He gripped Rachel's hand, squeezing it so hard she winced, but she didn't pull away. The driver's door opened, and a woman in her mid-40s stepped out. Karen Johnson carried herself with the calm steadiness of someone who had worked with animals for years. Her hand tightened on the leash of the dog that followed. Daniel's knees nearly buckled. There he was, Rex. The Belgian Malinois looked almost exactly as he remembered, coat a rich fawn color with streaks of gray now dusting his muzzle. His ears stood tall, his eyes sharp, scanning the environment like a soldier still on patrol. "Rex," Daniel whispered, the name trembling off his lips, but the dog didn't respond. Rex stood beside Karen, posture alert yet detached, gaze sweeping past Daniel as if he were just another stranger in the crowd. The indifference struck harder than Daniel had prepared for. After all the years, all the searching, his closest companion didn't know him. He swallowed hard, forcing himself to stand tall, even as something inside him threatened to crack. For a long moment, Daniel could only stare at Rex, stunned by the wall of distance between them. The dog's steady gaze, so familiar yet so foreign, pierced him like a blade. He clenched his jaw, fighting to keep his composure. And in that silence, his mind drifted back to the place where their bond had been forged. It was Iraq, spring of 2016. The sun there was merciless, white-hot, and unrelenting, pressing down on the narrow streets of Fallujah. Dust clung to every surface, broken concrete walls, rusting cars, even the fabric of Daniel's uniform. The air carried the acrid scent of smoke and oil, lingering reminders of battles past. Daniel walked with measured steps, his rifle slung and ready, but his eyes fixed mostly on the dog just a few feet ahead. Rex moved low and deliberate, nose twitching, ears swiveling. Every muscle beneath his tan coat seemed wound-tight, coiled for action. "Easy, buddy," Daniel murmured, his voice calm despite the adrenaline humming in his veins. The rest of the squad followed behind, their boots crunching on gravel, weapons sweeping side to side. It was Daniel and Rex's job to clear the route for a convoy expected to roll through within the hour. One mistake could mean disaster, not just for them, but for dozens of soldiers depending on the path being safe. Rex slowed as they approached a dented sedan abandoned near a collapsed storefront. His tail stiffened, his breathing changed ever so slightly. To anyone else, it might have seemed like nothing. But Daniel had learned to read him as clearly as a written signal. He raised a fist, halting the squad. "Hold!" The street fell into tense silence, broken only by the distant flap of a torn banner in the wind. Rex circled the car with practiced precision, every step deliberate. Then suddenly he sat perfectly still, his trained alert for explosives. Daniel's pulse surged. "IED 10 o'clock, he called out, his voice sharp and steady. The team instantly shifted into position, calling in the EOD unit. Daniel dropped to one knee, reaching out to scratch behind Rex's ear. "Good boy, that's my guy," he whispered. Rex's eyes met his, steady and knowing, as if to say, "We did it." Hours later, when the convoy rumbled safely through, Daniel felt a swell of pride that had nothing to do with medals or commendations. It was the pride of trust built one mission at a time, when survival depended on silent signals and unwavering loyalty. That night back at their temporary quarters, Daniel sat on his cot with a notebook balanced on his knees. He wrote in quick, cramped lines details of the patrol, names of the men, the feel of the heat, the sound of the silence before Rex's signal. He had started the habit months ago, a way to make sense of the chaos. Rex lay stretched out beside him, head resting on Daniel's boot. The dog's body was relaxed now, chest rising and falling with steady breaths, but his ears twitched at every noise outside. Even in rest, he was a sentinel. Daniel reached down, running his fingers through the short fur at Rex's neck. "One day, when this is all over," he murmured, "I'm taking you home. We'll hike the hill country, maybe swim in the Guadalupe River. You'll love Texas, Rex, you'll love it." Rex's tail thumped softly against the floor as though he understood. In that small, fleeting moment, the war seemed far away. It was just a man and his dog, bound together by something deeper than orders, by trust, by survival, by love unspoken but absolute. The memory of Fallujah lingered, sharp as broken glass, but Daniel's thoughts soon shifted to the day that had cut deepest of all. It was late 2017, nearly a year after that mission. The desert sun still beat down, though the pace of operations had slowed. Daniel had grown used to Rex's steady presence, his shadow on patrol, his comfort at night. That was why the words from the veterinarian felt like a punch to the chest. Rex is developing arthritis in his back legs, the officer explained gently, standing in the shade of a canvas tent. He's still capable, but policy requires we retire him while he's healthy enough to enjoy it. Daniel blinked, stunned. Retire now? He's still working like a champ. I know, the vet said, sympathy in his eyes. But the regulations are clear. He'll be evaluated at Lackland Air Force Base, then placed in adoption or with a rescue organization. It's for his well-being. Daniel's voice tightened. Then I'll adopt him, the answer came quickly, almost rehearsed. You can't, not while you're still deployed. He needs stability and you have months left in your rotation. The logic was sound, but it didn't ease the ache that spread through Daniel's chest. How could he explain to Rex that after everything, they'd be separated? How could he walk away from the one constant that had seen him through the darkest nights? The final evening together was torture cloaked in routine. Daniel put Rex through their normal drills, his commands firm, his praise steady. But his hands lingered longer on Rex's fur, his voice breaking slightly when he whispered, "Good boy. Always my good boy." When lights went out, Daniel didn't climb into his cot. Instead, he stretched out on the concrete floor beside Rex's kennel. One hand slipped through the bars, fingers tangled in the dog's coat. The weight of Rex's head pressed into his palm, a silent reassurance. "I'll find you again," Daniel whispered into the dark. "I promise." Morning came too quickly. The transport vehicle idled nearby, its engine grumbling like an unwanted reminder. When the handler clipped on Rex's leash, the dog looked back, confusion in his intelligent eyes. His paws dug slightly into the dirt, reluctant to leave. Daniel stood rigid, fists clenched at his sides, jaw locked so tight it ached. He didn't move, didn't speak, because he knew if he did, the dam would break. Only when the truck turned the corner and disappeared from sight did he let his head drop, his shoulders shaking in silence. The war had taken many things from him, but nothing compared to that goodbye. For months after his deployment ended, Daniel carried an emptiness that no amount of rest or routine could fill. Coming home to Texas should have been a relief, but the absence of Rex made every quiet moment heavier. The sound of barking at a neighbor's yard would stop him in his tracks. A scuffed rubber ball tucked in his duffel brought more ache than comfort. He began searching almost immediately. At first, he thought it would be simple. Military working dogs had records after all. But what he discovered was a maze, layers of paperwork, scattered adoption agencies, and outdated contact lists. He started with Lackland Air Force Base, where Rex had been sent for evaluation. By the time Daniel reached out, Rex had already been transferred to a civilian rescue group. That group, overwhelmed with dogs, had passed him to another. The trail went cold more than once, days blurred into weeks. Daniel spent long nights hunched over his laptop, scrolling through forums, sending emails that often went unanswered. He called organizations in different states, explained who he was, what Rex meant to him. Sometimes people were kind. Sometimes they gave him nothing but a polite apology. Rachel watched all this quietly at first, but she knew the signs of a man on the edge. She had seen them in her patients, and she saw them in her husband. So she stepped in, sitting beside him as he made calls, jotting down numbers, reminding him to eat when his focus narrowed too much. One evening, as Daniel closed his notebook in frustration, Rachel touched his arm. "We'll find him, maybe not tomorrow, but we will. You promised him, and I know you don't break promises." Her confidence became his anchor. He kept going, even when the trail seemed hopeless. Then came the breakthrough. At the hospital where Rachel worked, she had a patient whose daughter volunteered with several dog rescue groups. While chatting, Rachel mentioned Daniel's long search. The daughter's eyes widened. "Belgian Malinois, retired military. I think one of the groups I know just placed a dog like that in Texas." The lead was fragile, but it was enough. Phone calls were made, connections pulled, and then, at last, the confirmation. Rex was alive, safe, and under the care of Karen Johnson, a foster experienced with service dogs. When Rachel told Daniel, he didn't answer at first. He just sat, staring at the wall, the words struggling to take shape. Then he whispered, almost to himself, "I found him, I really found him." It wasn't the end of the journey, just another step, but for the first time in years, hope felt real. The day of the reunion had finally arrived, yet Daniel felt as if he were stepping into combat again. His chest was tight, his hands unsteady, but he forced himself to breathe as Rachel guided him toward the outdoor patio of the small barbecue restaurant. Karen Johnson, the foster guardian, led Rex to a shaded corner. The dog sat with perfect discipline, eyes alert, scanning the space as if still on patrol. Daniel lowered himself into a chair across from them. His fingers worked at the strap of his watch, a nervous habit he couldn't shake. Karen's voice was calm but careful. Sometimes familiar scents can help trigger recognition. Do you have anything from your time together? Daniel swallowed and pulled a worn glove from his pack. The fabric was faded, still carrying faint traces of sand and sweat. He held it out with a trembling hand. Rex sniffed, ears flicking forward. For a moment, Daniel's heart surged, but then the dog simply sat back, gaze detached. No spark of memory lit his eyes. The rejection hit like a blow. Daniel's shoulders sagged, the glove falling into his lap. He had imagined this moment so many times, imagined Rex bounding toward him with joy. Instead, there was only silence. Rachel reached across the table, squeezing his hand. "Give it time," she whispered. Her steady presence kept him from unraveling. Karen nodded, studying Rex. He's been through a lot of transitions. Sometimes a signal or a special item works better than a general scent. "Did you two have any unique routines?" Daniel hesitated, then pulled out a small rubber tug toy from his bag. Its surface was worn smooth, chewed edges still marked with Rex's teeth. He only ever used it after successful missions. As he held it up, something shifted. Rex's head tilted, ears pricking higher. His body leaned forward ever so slightly, nose working harder as though a long-buried memory stirred. Daniel dared to breathe. He made a quick hand signal they had practiced countless times. "Check in." Rex's eyes sharpened, focusing on Daniel's hands. The change was small, but to Daniel it felt enormous. His chest tightened, but this time with hope. Rachel caught the moment too. Her smile was soft, her eyes glistening. "He knows something," she murmured. Daniel leaned closer, voice husky. "You remember, don't you, boy?" Rex gave no full response yet, but the air felt different, charged with possibility. The silence wasn't rejection anymore. It was the edge of recognition, the fragile beginning of something breaking through. The toy rested in Daniel's hand, small and scuffed, but it carried more weight than any medal he had ever earned. He held it up, heart pounding, while Rex's eyes tracked the object with a focus that hadn't been there moments ago. Karen leaned forward, her voice low, as if she too didn't want to break the spell. "Try one of your old commands, something simple, something he knows only from you." Daniel's throat tightened. For years, he had kept those signals tucked away in the corners of his memory, afraid that using them would only deepen the ache of absence. Now, he raised his hand and made the motion for ready, crisp, and clear, exactly as he had done hundreds of times in the streets of Iraq. Rex's ears shot forward, his body stiffened, muscles tensing with the old instinct. He didn't move yet, but Daniel saw it, the flicker of recognition, the light dawning behind those sharp brown eyes. Encouraged, Daniel tried another. The signal for check-in, his palm lifted, two fingers pointing, the motion swift and practiced. Rex leaned forward. A low whine slipped from his throat, unbidden. The sound cracked Daniel's composure. His chest burned and his vision blurred. "That's it, buddy," he whispered, voice breaking. "You remember." He lifted the toy higher, giving it a gentle shake. The squeak, though faint from years of wear, pierced the air. That was all it took. Rex's body shifted from rigid alertness to explosive joy. His tail, still and heavy just moments before, wagged in sharp bursts, faster and faster until his entire hindquarters swayed. He pulled hard against the leash, nails scraping on the patio concrete, a sharp yelp of recognition escaping his throat. Karen gasped softly. "Oh my goodness," she unclipped the leash just as Rex surged forward. The dog launched himself at Daniel, nearly toppling the chair. Daniel caught him clumsily, arms wrapping around the warm, trembling body. Rex pressed against him, licking his face, whining with a high-pitched urgency that Daniel hadn't heard in years, the same sound Rex used to make after being reunited with him in the field. Tears streamed freely down Daniel's face. He buried his head in Rex's fur, inhaling the earthy scent, half dog, half memory of desert dust. "I found you," he choked out. "I kept my promise." Around them, the patio had fallen silent. Diners watched with damp eyes, some reaching for napkins to dab at their cheeks. Rachel, seated just feet away, had tears slipping down her face, but her smile was wide, luminous. For a moment, grief and years of emptiness lifted, replaced by something Daniel had almost forgotten: peace. Then, as if to break the heaviness of the moment, Rex's exuberance sent a glass of sweet tea flying off the table, splashing across the wooden floor. A couple nearby jumped in surprise, and then laughter broke out, soft at first, then spreading. Even Daniel laughed through his tears, wiping at his face as Rex planted another sloppy kiss on his cheek. Rachel stood and joined them, laying a gentle hand on Daniel's shoulder. "Told you," she whispered, "he could never forget you." Daniel looked up at her, eyes swollen but shining. He shook his head, still holding Rex close. I almost forgot what it felt like being whole. Karen, watching quietly, brushed at her own eyes. I think we can skip the rest of the introductions, she said with a shaky smile. He knows exactly where he belongs. Rex pressed tighter against Daniel's leg, his tail thumping against the ground like a drumbeat. In that moment, there was no doubt the wall of distance had crumbled, and the bond they thought lost had come roaring back to life. The drive home felt different from any road Daniel had traveled in years. Rex sat in the back seat of their pickup, head wedged between the front seats, his breath warm on Daniel's arm. Every few minutes, Rex gave a contented sigh, as if reassuring himself this wasn't another mission, not another dream, this was real. Rachel glanced back from the passenger seat and smiled. He fits right in, doesn't he? Daniel kept one hand on the wheel, the other absently scratching Rex's ear. Like he never left, he murmured. His voice was thick with disbelief, but his smile came easier than it had in a long time. At their small home in the suburbs, everything had been prepared for weeks. A plush bed waited in the corner of the living room, alongside a basket filled with toys Rachel had carefully chosen. A new water bowl gleamed under the kitchen light. The moment the door opened, Rex trotted inside, nose twitching as he explored every corner, tail wagging in cautious bursts. He's casing the place, Daniel said with a chuckle. Rachel laughed. Old habits die hard, but the adjustment wasn't without challenges. On the second night, a Texas thunderstorm rolled across the sky. The crack of lightning sent Rex bolting into the hallway, ears flat, eyes wide. Daniel wasn't far behind, his own chest tight, breath short, as memories of explosions and sirens clawed their way back. They ended up huddled together in the bathroom, the storm raging outside. Rachel knelt between them, speaking softly, her hands steady on both man and dog. You're safe, both of you, right here, right now. By the time the thunder faded, Daniel realized something he hadn't before. Healing wasn't about erasing the past. It was about facing it together. Days settled into new rhythms. Morning walks through the neighborhood became a ritual, Daniel with his coffee in hand, Rex proudly carrying the old tug toy in his mouth. In the afternoons, they played fetch in the backyard. Not drills anymore, not life or death exercises, just simple joy. Rex would bound across the grass, ears flapping, then sprawl in the shade of the oak tree while Daniel sat on the steps with Rachel. There were lighter moments too. One evening, Rachel came into the living room to find her slipper missing. Seconds later, Rex strutted through with it clamped in his mouth, tail wagging as if daring anyone to take it back. Daniel burst out laughing, the sound startling even to himself. Looks like he's still got a sense of humor, he said, wiping tears of laughter from his eyes. Rachel shook her head but smiled. Guess he fits this family perfectly. As weeks passed, Daniel noticed something else changing. The nightmares that had haunted him for years began to fade. He still had rough nights, but with Rex pressed against his leg and Rachel's hand resting over his, the darkness felt less overwhelming. The simple act of stroking Rex's fur grounded him, pulling him back to the present when memories threatened to drag him under. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the Texas sky in gold and pink, Daniel sat on the back porch steps, watching Rachel toss a ball across the yard. Rex sprinted after it, barking with youthful excitement that belied the gray on his muzzle. Daniel leaned back, feeling a warmth in his chest that wasn't from the setting sun. For the first time in years, home felt whole. It was just past midnight when Daniel woke to the sound of claws clicking softly across the hardwood floor. At first, he thought it was a dream, but the low, steady growl from the hallway told him otherwise. He sat up, heart quickening, and found Rex sitting rigid by the front door. The dog's ears were pricked, his body tense, eyes fixed on the shadows outside the window. Rex, Daniel whispered. The dog didn't move. His chest rose and fell in sharp, measured breaths, the same way he had breathed when sweeping dangerous streets years ago. For a moment, Daniel's pulse spiked, the old instinct kicking in. He reached for the baseball bat he kept by the nightstand and crept forward. Rachel stirred behind him, voice groggy but concerned. What's happening? Not sure, Daniel murmured, pressing a finger to his lips. Then, as he stepped into the living room, the faint smell of smoke reached his nose. His eyes darted to the kitchen, where a thin trail of haze curled upward from the outlet above the counter. The old coffee maker had shorted, sparking against the socket. Daniel lunged, yanking the plug free just as a small flame flickered at the edge of the cord. He smothered it with a towel, heart racing, until the smoke began to clear. When it was over, he sank into a chair, breathing hard. Rex patted over, pressing his weight against Daniel's leg, tail wagging slowly as if to say, I did my job. Rachel appeared in the doorway, hand to her chest. He saved us, she whispered, her eyes wide. Daniel reached down, scratching behind Rex's ears. Yeah, he said softly, a smile tugging at his lips. Some habits don't fade. The incident left Daniel shaken, but also strangely reassured. Rex hadn't just remembered him, he had remembered his purpose. Even in retirement, the instincts of a guardian burned strong. Later, as Daniel lay back in bed with Rex curled at his side, he thought about what had just happened. The war had taken much, left scars both seen and unseen. But perhaps those scars weren't just wounds. Perhaps they were reminders of resilience, of duty, of loyalty that didn't end with deployment. In the dark, he whispered into Rex's fur, "Still watching over me, huh?" The dog let out a soft sigh, drifting into sleep, as faithful as ever. Weeks turned into months, and the rhythm of life settled into something Daniel had never thought possible: steady, hopeful, even joyful. The bond he once feared lost had not only returned, it had grown stronger, carrying him forward in ways he hadn't expected. Word of the reunion spread quietly at first, shared through veteran support groups and rescue networks. Soon, other handlers began reaching out to Daniel, curious, hopeful, desperate for news of their own dogs. Some wanted advice on searching, others just wanted to sit with someone who understood. Rachel was the one who suggested it. Why not start a small group, a place for handlers and their dogs, or even just veterans who need the company? Daniel hesitated. He had never been the type to stand in the spotlight. But watching Rex rest his head on the lap of another veteran one afternoon, eyes soft and steady, he realized the gift they had. Rex wasn't just his partner anymore. He could be a bridge for others, too. With Rachel's help, Daniel began hosting meetups at the local park. Veterans would gather, some with dogs, some without, sharing coffee, laughter, and stories that didn't always come easily elsewhere. Rex became the star, approaching each person with quiet patience as though he knew who needed him most. At home, life was gentler. Daniel still had hard nights, but with Rachel's hand in his and Rex's steady breathing at his feet, the weight was lighter. The nightmares came less often, and when they did, Rex's nudge was enough to bring him back to the present. One golden evening, as the Texas sun dipped low, Daniel sat on the back porch steps, watching Rachel water the flowers while Rex sprawled at his feet. The air smelled of cedar and freshly cut grass. For once his mind was quiet. He reached down, scratching behind Rex's ears, repeating words he had whispered long ago. "Told you you'd love Texas." Rex thumped his tail, eyes half closed in contentment. Daniel smiled, his chest full, not of the old ache, but of something stronger: gratitude. The war had taken much, but it had not taken everything. What remained was proof of survival, of love, of a loyalty that distance and time could never erase. And in that quiet, Daniel finally felt what he had searched for all along: peace. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us share more powerful stories of hope, healing, and the unbreakable bond between humans and their dogs.